Welcome to Applied Intelligence, a conversation at the intersection of people, technology, and getting stuff done. And now, here's your host, Imtiaz Ahmed.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Applied Intelligence. Today, I have a very fun guest to speak to, Pasha Rayan. Pasha is the current CTO and co-founder of Forage. And we'll get into that a bit later, but more importantly, I met Pasha many, many years ago, and Pasha was actually my intern back at Racket in Sydney, and now he's gone on to do some many and wonderful things, and we're going to get into that in a lot of detail. Very recently, though, however, we're both in New York, and I got to catch up with him, which was very cool, and hear all the stories of what it's like to be a startup founder, and there's so many crazy things that we're going to talk about today. But Pasha, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's good to chat again, MTS. It's funny, right? Because when we met, I was just at university, figuring out what to do with my life, and I think it's a little bit better nowadays. But yeah, definitely a long time ago.
Yes. Yeah. Don't worry, man. I still don't know what I'm doing in my life. I just happening to get through day by day. But anyway, just so the audience gets to know who Pasha is, I'd love to ask this question, which is, if you had an autobiography and if it had 5 chapters, what would the title of each one of those 5 chapters be?
Yeah, I love this question because it really makes you distill into those phases of your life, right? And it's funny, right? For me, a lot of it, my first chapter would always be that introductory childhood chapter of just basically, being a pretty normal kid, not really caring about too much except for video games and movies. I guess the second chapter in my mind really would be being young and trying to figure out the world. So there was a period of my life when I was maybe 16 to 21, where before I knew anything about anything at all, I grew up in a single parent family, so I had no real exposure to the outside world and what was going on and what work was like or what different things you could do at school or university. So my second chapter would basically be this phase of trying to figure things out by going deep. And that second chapter would be that phase where I picked up, books about philosophy. I read a lot of books across different topics. It's when I started to learn to code on my own or at school. Yeah, I was just kind of a voracious reader and trying to figure out things there. So that second chapter would be, let's go deeper and try to figure things out. My third chapter would basically be probably a chapter of my university years, where I kind of took the approach of university where I had kind of figured out at that younger age that this is a great time to actually figure things out, but also do things at a lower risk. I had not learned anything about the corporate world. I hadn't learned much about academia. I decided to, out of pure randomness, do a degree in commerce and philosophy and computer science with the liberal studies at UNSW. And for me, it was really just a distillation of, I had read a lot in the previous years. I had only started to figure out what the world was like, but I thought university or college was the best way to actually test out some of these ideas and have fun, trying to do student society things, have fun trying to build things on the side, have fun learning, I would go out and just pick up random textbooks from the library, read them for fun, and try to understand what the topic was about. It could be economics, could be random things around history, or sometimes the sciences. And put them back and just kind of get back to tinkering and try out things in the real world. After that, chapter 4 would be a chapter of my life on actually kind of doing real work for the first time. That's when I interned with you, MTS. When I interned at Records, I worked in the corporate world. I spent some time working as a consultant, spent some time working as a product manager at a tech company in Australia. And that would be that 4th chapter, just a chapter of exploring work. There you kind of I went through multiple types of business cultures, and I think kind of learned what I thought would work and actually is kind of what we want to do for the rest of our lives. And the 5th chapter would be and I guess you could probably subdivide chapter 5 into a ton of sub chapters because it's still ongoing, but really would be my journey with Forage and kind of life ever since starting a startup. So chapter 5 would basically be titled Forage, and then under that would probably be about 5 or 6 sub chapters for the gamut of jobs and roles that we've had there and the crazy journeys and stories. So chapter 5 is probably a bit of a undersell, but that will probably be the 5th chapter, but that could be its own book in its own right. So yeah.
But let's dive into that, Pasha. So what led you to create Forage? and what problem does it solve, and how does it kind of work? Let's go into a bit of detail to give people perspective in terms of what you work on right now.
Awesome. Well, we step back, like Forage is a platform that runs virtual job simulations. So when we started Forage, we basically had this idea that, and this thesis that the model of hiring someone just doesn't work today. Because today, a company would spend a lot of time to figure out how to hire someone, then spend 2 or 3 years to train them up. And then after that, they realize that either that candidate or that person just doesn't fit the role or isn't good enough for the role. Or on the flip side, the candidate realizes that career isn't for them. And what we thought was we'd flip it around and go, well, why don't we actually train people first? Then the company can hire them. Then they can stick around for much longer. And the vehicle to kind of prove that out are our virtual job simulations. And Forage basically is the platform to do a 3 to 5 hour virtual job simulation of any company. We try to do work with any big company in the world. So university student or a college student can jump on to theforage.com and do a job simulation with the Boston Consulting Group, Pfizer, Lululemon, General Electric. We work with a lot of these companies around the world. And in that simulation, a student actually tries out what it's like to do a job. I guess in my mind, it would be like they get to experience what it's like to work with their own version of Imtiaz at Reckitt's. But it's the actual stuff, nothing theoretical. And when they do that, students actually start to realize what they find interesting. And on the flip side, employers today are finding that the students that do these Forage job simulations are much more hireable. So a student on Forage is 3 to 4 times more likely to land the job than a student who hasn't done Forage in the application processes that we work with companies all around the world. Companies love us because the students that do come on board, when they interview them, they know the key terms of an industry. They know what the work is like, and they know that they're not going to be someone that drops out in a year or two. So that's kind of like the core bit of Forage. And I guess before I get into what led to it, where we are today, we're quite lucky, right? We started in Sydney, Australia, but we've been lucky enough to go around the world. We have offices here in New York and San Francisco and in London. When we started, we had 300 students on our website when we were in Australia, but now we have 4.5 million students around the world. We have 150 employers, and we've been going down the venture capital startup route, and we've been lucky enough to raise around $40 to $50 million in venture funding in the last 5 to 6 years. So that's Forage. And what led us to create that ecosystem, personal journey or story for me and Tom, my co-founder. I think the funny thing is when we created Forage and wanted to create something in the student space, even before the first lines of code were written, and Tom, my co-founder, and I independently were just always helping students out with their resume and how they could land a job. And I think for us, we grew up in a single parent family. We had no idea about this. And I think for me, a lot of it was I feel like I got really lucky landing into really cool jobs, doing cool internships, meeting amazing people who could help out with our resume. And my co-founder, I think, felt the same. And I think for us, giving back was always a way to actually really kind of help the next generation of people who maybe didn't have the best of luck. Tom grew up in Wagga Wagga and didn't know anything about any of this stuff as well. So that's kind of that was the feeling us wanting to give back was really the genesis of the company. And I think what led us to create it was us realizing that there probably should have been a better way to do this at scale, right? And I probably go into the story of how we started off as a mentoring marketplace to solve that. But we really just started Forage as a passion project to solve that. But as we went along, we realized that there was a way to productize the main experiences required to get someone to be ready for a job, do that at scale, and do that in a way that really impacts education and hiring around the world.
That's incredible. It's very cool to see a story where the work that you do has an impact on the way that you've kind of perceived the world and not necessarily received that help or seen that help growing up, and then kind of landing in a place where you can actually do that. I never knew I wanted to do sales. I wanted to do commercial. I never knew that I wanted to manage a P&L. And I kind of stumbled into corporate more than anything else. I thought I was going to be a lawyer growing up, and I didn't necessarily have the mentors or the people around me, or even my dad's friends or my mum's friends. They weren't necessarily in the corporate sector because they were first generation immigrants to Australia, right? My dad had a white collar job, but it was a very technical role, not necessarily managing commercials. But kind of I faked my way into Reckitt and I'm still that record, but that was pure chance, and it shouldn't necessarily be pure chance in terms of how people find the right career path that really lets them shine, right?
Yeah, and you know what's funny? Like I remember your story, like back when I was an intern, and you were chatting it through, like how you got through 2 records and before it, and you know that, and like many other people have similar stories where they've been able to find their great careers for luck. And I think the thing that I always pinch myself with is that like not everyone was as lucky as us, right? Like there are lots of people at the different schools I've gone to that maybe just weren't as lucky to like land into school or figure out that, you know, for you, commercial was good. For me, being in tech was kind of something that I wanted to do. And some people just get kind of like swept away. And, you know, I actually think it's also like, when we step back, you know, the scope of, there's so much talent out there in the world, but getting that talent to the opportunity where they can flourish is actually something that isn't done very well yet. And, you know, it can be done better in so many ways. But I think for us, you know, like being able to solve that problem you mentioned of like having, you know, like being able to like bridge that gap of going, oh, someone doesn't know or doesn't have the connections about an industry to, hey, in your own time, in your own safe space, in your own safe way, you can find, you know, what particular career will align with you, I think is, you know, in its small way going to be really impactful. And I think, you know, for us, it was always trying to create a way where we could align getting that impact while at the same time proving that you can actually try to solve this problem, which means a lot to a lot of people, and turn it into a very good business and turn it into something that is also unique and didn't exist yet. So all of that kind of packaged together into kind of what ended up becoming Forage.
Like, I think about working in commercial and working in sales in particular, and that's not something that's necessarily taught at university, nor is it taught at like high school. So you don't necessarily hear about becoming a salesperson or a commercial leader. And you hear about being a business person, right? But you don't necessarily hear about being a salesman as, you know, growing up. So kind of like really giving the opportunity to people that, you know, already have these innate skills of building relationships and or, you know, other very technical things or not non-technical things, and then putting them in a situation for them to actually flourish, which is very, very cool. So
yeah,
coming back and steering more towards, you know, applications of generative AI, which is such a hot topic right now. How is Gen AI really changing the way that you're going to market with Forage in the near term?
it's a great question. And recently at Forage, we had run an internal hackathon around generative AI. I think maybe a bit of context and preface is that, you know, obviously as Forage, we've been growing a lot and have been doing a lot with, you know, helping place amazing students and talent into like great companies out there. But Gen AI kind of like came in like a storm essentially and kind of like shook the world of technology because it allows you to do so much more than you could have done before, right? Before to even get close to anything close to what OpenAI and these other generative AI tools offered, you'd have to spend your millions and millions of dollars on a data science team, and they themselves would not have enough general content to be able to train a powerful AI. And so generative AI came in, and for us, like I think at a high level, like the question is, how does generative AI actually change the world of recruitment and education? I'll start with education in that generative AI is very powerful because it allows basically anyone to have a personalized tutor and allows anyone to have a whole ecosystem of information and content and basically the ability to learn tailored to that individual person and where they're at and what they're looking to learn. So when I think about generative AI on the education front, there's a learning in education, which is the 2 sigma problem, which is essentially if someone gets personalized tutoring, they are 2 standard deviations better than someone that didn't get, you know, a personalized tutoring who went through a process of learning something, a topic with mastery before moving on to the next topic. And generative AI is actually a huge thing that can actually enable anyone to go through to get that mentorship that would have been basically only like accessible to those with like connections or enough money to hire someone to tutor you at a topic. Now, how that relates to employment is that the process of landing a job and understanding an industry and a career is in itself a whole educational topic that isn't tapped very well right now, isn't done very well right now. And I think for us at Forage, that piece of like, you know, us helping the student to acclimatize to, let's say for you, like sales or product management, there's a lot of opportunity for us to use generative AI to both understand where a student is at the moment and then give them the right content, information, and talk to them in a way that allows someone to like actually pick up the skills in an industry and then faster than as if they were going to do it themselves, or faster than basically what a school does. And in the world of recruitment, it's really interesting because ultimately with recruitment, it's always going to be a human to human process, right? Hiring someone is basically a long-term project around getting someone to work with you for hours. And ultimately, a human will always want to be there. But for recruiters and companies, generative AI is a very powerful tool to A, scale up things that they would have done manually, and B, basically be an assistant to the recruiters to find people that they're looking for better. There's always that analogy where like in chess competitions, the people who, you could have a lot of smart people, like the top chess players in a competition, and then you can have AI on the other end, and then the chess players and AI might battle it out. But the teams that do better are the ones that are allowed to be part human, part AI. So they're able to make decisions with the assistance of AI to make better moves, to make, to make better long-term decisions. And that's kind of the way we see how generative AI can help with recruitment. I can talk about the different paradigms of AI and recruitment over the last decade or so. But today, I think the main thing is both because of regulatory things happening, but also because ultimately recruitment is always going to be a human to human kind of experience. Generative AI basically allows companies to supercharge their recruiters to find people who are genuinely talented. And I can go through some of the projects we're doing at Forage for that. But yeah, that's kind of where I think the application of generative AI can make a difference in that education bucket and in the recruitment bucket quite heavily, because they allow us to do things that weren't able to be done before.
Let's go into detail, man. I think the audience is going to be interested in looking at those specific applications and seeing how people can massively unlock productivity on one end, but also the recruitment experience on the other end as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. So like, let's say with students. So on the education side, in our 3 to 5 hour virtual job simulation, the Forage would come on and they would basically be bombarded with like terms they might have never heard of before. For finance, like what is net present value? What is weighted average cost of capital? Even in sales, like, what is objection handling? There are so many things that a student doesn't know about a job beforehand. And we do kind of like dive them straight into what is used in industry from day one, partly because like that's what real work is like, but partly because like that's how you acclimatize to a new job and industry. It's through being exposed to these things and figuring it out. Now today, for the process of learning, we're looking and using generative AI to provide personalized feedback and onboarding into these programs. So we're running a lot of cool experiments where when a student submits some work, if they're, some of our tasks, because they're very practical, some tasks might be like draft an email to your manager or client. Those tasks, we're now basically supercharging with AI feedback to go to the student to say, hey, that looks really good, but have you considered doing X, Y, Z? Because this is how professionals might approach it. And it's in that kind of iterative process. Because learning as exams is a really bad model for actually getting someone to be much better at work. Learning as an iterative process where you try something, get feedback, and improve on it is much more natural. It's basically what you do with a manager on your work. So we're using generative AI to both analyze the work submitted, because before it would actually be a lot of work to even set up unique tests to understand if something's possible. With generative AI, with a bit of code and the OpenAI ecosystem, you can actually understand what's working, what's not working, and then deliver that feedback in a way in a form of language that really does actually work with who the student is, personalized at a certain time. My thought has always been like, if you think about junior salespeople or junior bankers, right? You don't actually, someone might come into those roles with a degree in history or philosophy, but in 3 or 6 months' time, they might be a very competent investment banker or a very competent commercial sales analyst. That process isn't magic. It's that process of iteration. And with Gen AI, we're finding ways to put that into the learning flow for students. On the flip side, we're working on creating course content that's specific to topics, less companies, but specific to, let's say, learning how to use net present value at work, or learning how to use tools like, a CRM at work. And we're using generative AI to kind of really take a lot of these things and create content that is more tailored to students so they can learn faster in a format they want as well. So it's a huge advantage there for us to create supporting content that couldn't exist before because of generative AI. And, with some of the input from our team and our employer partners and everything else. It's actually quite cool seeing that play out. And things that would have taken months or would have taken, much more money to kind of do or time, can do with Gen AI and provide a better learning experience. On the recruiter side, I think the exciting part is that like being able to process thousands of candidates and finding candidates that are similar at a conceptual level, whether it be through a vector search database or whether it be through some of these like, generative AI tools that have some reasoning in them. I think that's really exciting because being able for helping these recruiters identify great people, and then even like personalizing the reach out flow and engagement flow, not just in a normal CRM way, but also in a way that understands who someone is uniquely, is going to be a game changer. Recruiters are so busy, especially the recruiters we work with, right? They're so busy, they're so time poor, that being able to equip them with an understanding of who someone is and why they're special and why their journey is more unique. Having being able to highlight that this person's gone through a very more difficult route, or this person is exceptional in a certain set of ways. It's going to be really powerful for recruiters as they try to sift through people to reach out to and engage with over time. And this is not just at the interview stage. This is much before, when people are nurturing and meeting students and candidates, a year before they even apply. So I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity overall for recruiters to really up their game. So yeah, that's kind of where we're seeing it kind of like come into and kind of like really hit, even things like, there's like so many different projects and topics that we've seen that I'm super pumped about. But that's an example of a few of those.
Coming back to the student side experience, I think in the analogy of thinking about this like a coach in a sporting team. So the coach isn't necessarily the leader of the team. The team captain is, when you're on the ground, the team captain is kind of leading the shots, whereas the coach is kind of giving you real-time feedback, or during training is giving you that feedback on how to improve. And so, if you're going through this course content and you're getting that real-time feedback, it is the best opportunity or the best timing for you to absorb that feedback and actually make a change, rather than submitting something, waiting a day or a week or a month to get that feedback. Like when you get that real-time feedback, you actually have that opportunity to improve because in the mindset of learning and absorbing, right? So, that productivity unlock or that real-time experience side for a student or someone looking to improve their skills is amazing, right?
Yes. And I think one of the reasons programming has grown so fast as an industry is actually because of these feedback loops. When you write a program, within a second if it doesn't work or not. And there are enough error messages for you to go figure out how to fix it. That learning cycle, doesn't exist in other industries. And I think there's so much opportunity for talent to be unlocked if they can get that learning feedback cycle as fast as the tech world, because, being able to know if your work is in the right direction is actually it's not just helpful for learning, but it's also stress relieving. It's also great for a company. I think that's what's really exciting to see over the next period of time. And I think, going back to this point of education and that kind of cycle of learning, it is still actually quite crazy when you think about learning at universities. You submit an essay and a month later, you might get some feedback on that essay. I think there's a lot of opportunity in other parts of education to improve as well with generative AI. The feedback speed and the quality can be improved 1,000x in academia and, universities if they adopt some of these things as well. And I think that will only be good for the world, for everyone to be more equipped to tackle a range of different topics and tasks over time.
No, because I've led massive teams, so teams close to 100 people within the team. And there've been many occasions where there's really good talent, but I need to spend a lot of time to kind of upskill that person to get them to, the next level, the next 3 levels up from where they are today. But I physically don't have the time to do that. I don't want to discount the human experience of coaching and mentoring, but if everyone had access to a process in which they get feedback on their work immediately and it brings it up to the level that you're kind of seeking from said person, that's an incredible unlock to kind of really develop people, but also develop a culture in where everyone's really clear on what the expectations are from a business. Now, switching gears a little bit, but it's kind of related to what we've discussed so far, is a 2-part question, which is, if you were to build Forage from scratch today with all of the tools that you have from a generative AI point of view, how would the build of your startup change? One. And the flip side of that is, if I'm a student today and if I'm entering the workforce today and all this generative AI stuff is coming out, how should I equip myself best to kind of leverage this and be very unique within the marketplace?
Now, that is a great question. And it's always one of those things where when you're a startup founder, you always worry about what if someone decided to come in and really put some good effort into taking over your company or beating your company again. If I were to start Forage again today with generative AI, what would we do differently? Well, maybe I'd preface that question by saying, like, what would we do the same first? Ultimately for us, we've always put the experience of the students and our employers quite high, to the point where, like, that's kind of what we really want to optimize for. And we've always had an idea that, we put, our whole mission is to help help motivate students to land in great jobs. And I think that for us, we wouldn't change. I think for the following from that, what we wouldn't also change is like the high quality of like professionalism that we provide to our partner clients, the high level of trust and security that we kind of like always want to keep. This idea that, we are there to really help people out, and we're not here for a quick buck. We're really here to build something lasting and enduring. That wouldn't change. But with generative AI, what would change is probably the one thing I've learned though is like if you're able to use generative AI quite well, you can code a lot faster. So your first prototypes will be built much faster than before. I think feature-wise, what we would do differently as well is actually go down the route of being uber personalized from day one. Like how would you actually, given where you are right now, how do we get you to the level of being a very good graduate sales analyst or very good graduate like software engineer? We would probably focus down on that route much, much quicker because you can pull that off. Also, being able to create personalized content given a company, I think would be really powerful. So there'll be a features list. There's a set of features that would create that, because you could create from day one, including like automated feedback. That would be the stuff that we would do from day one. But ultimately, I think the funny thing about us is that there's a technology component to Forage, but then there is this amazing component of working within an awesome ecosystem of universities, top tier employers, great students all around the world, or like, from all different backgrounds. Like that, I think, will always remain a core part of what we do. And I think hopefully our disposition to do things right for everyone in that ecosystem would still be something that long-term keeps us around on that front. But yeah, there are lots of features where it would probably be easier to build from day one as a company if you had that there from day one. And to your second part of the question, what would students do to really become, how would you say, like, quite ready to like excel in a career? I mean, I think the fascinating thing is that whether we like it or not, students are using OpenAI to write their essays and support their work at a university. I think we need to get over the fact that that's happening, and that's always going to happen from here on in. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think the advice I would give students is kind of like maybe threefold. Point one is get your first draft of thinking and things with like ChatGPT and tools, and get into the habit of like having a really good question to ask ChatGPT based on what you're trying to achieve and using its output. The second thing is, I think we need to teach students how they can learn to improve upon what is generated by AI. One of the funny things I think about one of the ways I think about generated AI is that it really is just the quality of information out of OpenAI and these other tools is that it's like one of a really good grad. And you can improve a really good grad by giving it better instructions, by giving them example work and prompts to kind of example things to put into the prompt. But ultimately, it's always going to hit the ceiling where like, well, someone needs 3 or 4 years of experience in a certain industry. So, once you get good at the prompting and providing examples, I think students today really need to think about, okay, well, if this is the best that generated AI can create, how do I make it better? What can I do better? What's my unique insight on top of that? And I think getting into that second habit is going to be really powerful for a lot of people, because once you move past, okay, now we've got a tool that gives us basically, the average of everything on the internet, which is still good, but not perfect. How do you get past the average of the internet, and how do you actually start delivering work and insights, which is better than, what was done before? And I think that second piece is going to be critical for students. And that, that applies to any industry, right? Whether you're in the legal industry or you're in like the finance industry or the software engineering industry, like if you're able to like take some time to go, all right, well, this is what the average of the internet's intelligence will spit out. How do I get better than the average? You're going to start really pushing, the limits of your learning in a way that like I would have wished I could do a decade ago. But you can do that, as a student now within like a few months, right? You can really push yourself past what AI is offering and what the internet is offering, because you can now spend more time trying to get past what the generic answer is. And I think the third part really is just finding ways for it to integrate into like your process flow of like, all right, getting feedback, getting, like getting it to check your work, getting ChatGPT to be used in like different ways, right? Like I think checking your work and using like ChatGPT and other tools like that in different contexts is really powerful, right? Like I think I surprised some friends that, you can ask ChatGPT to help you write Excel formulas. Most people know how to write Excel formulas if they're already in the space, but like save time, you can just ask ChatGPT to write you a formula that is, if you look up across X, Y, Z fields, like you can use ChatGPT in those ways. And I think what that does is it helps you build up some muscle around understanding that actually there's a lot of different things in life that you can start both iterating and improving on, not just writing essays, but technical day-to-day tasks, ways to write standard replies to like emails, even getting ChatGPT to give you feedback on the email you might write someone, presuming you keep all the data quite safe. Those are the type of things that are, I think, really powerful. So those three buckets, of just using it well, and then the second one, being able to spend some of your own time getting past ChatGPT, and then the third one, which is using in a different context, is kind of like where we think a student can really excel with like the usage of AI, because I think the real opportunity is both someone who's like 17 or 18 or 19 today, with the help of OpenAI tools, they can go deeper. They can probably spend a lot less time doing the first draft. Then they can go deeper and further than like anyone in previous generations, because they already have a shortcut to getting to the edge of where knowledge can kind of be at a basic generic level. And then they can go wider, because now someone who's capable enough of like writing Excel's and like an Excel formula can maybe think about, oh, okay, well, if I can do Excel formulas, what if I write really good Google searches? What if I get ChatGPT to help me to write some basic code for the first time? And I think that's where it becomes really powerful, and you can become as someone young a powerhouse to be able to have impact both in work, your knowledge and learning in an industry in a way that is just unparalleled.
It's just the next evolution, right? Like, when the internet was introduced, we just had all of the world's books at our fingertips from a search point of view. And now we have access to all of that knowledge in a summarized version through ChatGPT. So it's just another tool for me. Now, the second part to that is you got to know how to use that tool, and you got to know what problem does that actually solve for. So if the problem that you're solving for is just answering an exam within a test, that's not life. That's just answering an exam and test at school. So, that human capability of critically thinking through a problem and providing a solution to said problem is where value is unlocked. So the people who understand how to leverage generative AI to actually solve problems and extract value, that's where the money is, and that's where this stuff is useful. Otherwise, it's like, how is this different from copy pasting out of Encarta a CD-ROM for an answer for an, essay that you have to do for English, right? It's not that different. So it's not relatively, plagiarism's not new. So yeah, shifting gears a bit now, and talking about startup life. What are the failures or the stuff-ups that you are most proud of so far?
Oh, there are so many. Some that you wouldn't put on podcasts. But I guess that's when we catch up over another drink or dinner or something, MTS. Yeah, I think the most failures or stuff-ups that we're most proud of. Ultimately, like when you go through the process of starting a startup, you're going to screw up. And like sometimes screw up really bad, sometimes screw up in a way that isn't too bad. Ultimately, we've been lucky to keep the company alive, both at a funding level, at a cash level, at a level where we still have customers. I don't know, failures. And I think when I think about the failures that I'm proud of, I really think about less moments when like we screwed up and then like we're like, cool, we learned from that. But more about the moments where, hey, actually like we screwed up, but we really have to push through. And I think for me, the biggest one was like, very early on, we had a project where we were helping some of our clients reach out to more students. And I think what we had done wrong was probably try to this is a client relationship one, but it's probably going a bit too far for your client in a way that was probably unexpected. Like we had reached out and figured out how to reach out to all the students around the US and basically try to help some of these students get into these programs by some of our partner clients. And that's probably just like a little too Wild Westy. I don't think that's the best answer though. I'm trying to think of like the best answer that I can get onto this podcast. I'm trying to think. Yeah, you look at that one up, but I'm just thinking of like, oh, there's a lot. I think the best feelings I guess we're proud of is that, we've been able to make some really tough decisions really, really well. I think we've overinvested in product lines in the past, and I think we've been able to make a call that wasn't working out and then move fast to change. Actually, maybe I'll go back and we'll go to this one. So maybe, I guess, the failures and stuff ups that I'm most proud of actually kind of relate to like us starting the company. When we started Forage, we thought Forage would have worked as a mentoring marketplace, as a website where a student can come onto our website and they can spend a bit of money if they could afford it. If they couldn't, we would cover it, to reach out to a mentor and give them career feedback, resume advice, and everything else. And we had gone all in on that idea very early on. And as we went on, we had spent months on this particular project and this idea, but it just wasn't working. I think what we had started to learn in that learning phase of creating a mentoring marketplace was that students weren't ready to be mentored, right? If you were 16, 17, 18, all the way to like 20, and you never had a mentor before, you actually don't know how to manage that relationship. From basic things like how do you talk to someone who's more experienced than you, to even things like how do you turn up on time? We had students who would turn up like 20 minutes late to some of these catch-ups with people at like Goldman Sachs or like, top tier brands. And it was like really interesting to learn. And that wasn't working out, and the model wasn't working out. And I think for us, like, why I'm really proud of like us realizing that our core hypothesis for our original product was really not on solid footing, was that we kind of really like, I think what happened was we listened to this great video by Y Combinator about what product market fit should look like. And what we had done was, we'd listened to it. And Tom and I think, we had realized after watching this video that we don't have product market fit. And I remember, I think we both independently just had sleepless nights and felt really sick about that fact. Like we knew we were doing something that was not going to work. And I think for us, it was at that realization really early on that we were like, this isn't going to work, but we're going to figure out what does work, and we're going to figure out what does work, but that still hits our mission. And I think that, like when we made that decision, when we were screwing up and spending a lot of time on something that wasn't working, was really pivotal for us, because for us, we then turned around and changed all of our behaviors and our processes to go find product market fit, So after like 3 months of working on this project, the mentoring marketplace, and it wasn't working, we had basically turned around and go, we're going to just iterate every week on a different kind of idea, make learnings on that idea, and talk to so many people to the point that we would just actually be sick of talking to people every day. And we were exhausted. I think we ended up talking to like a few hundred people by the end of it. We had iterated so fast, like within the next 2 months, that we had built up a list of learnings. Like, actually, students don't know how to get mentored, but they do want to know what a job is like. And companies do want to give out more work experience programs, but they literally can't physically, like just as you imagine before, you can't physically manage that many people. Companies can't physically manage 1,000 to 3,000 interns at any moment in time. And it was interesting. We had learned so much, and we had started picking up these learnings. And I think what I didn't realize, and what made it eventually a success was that, like, we spent an extreme amount of time talking to users and figuring out what did or didn't work. And after that extreme amount of time, I think Tom and I were just drinking and exhausted one afternoon, and we had just joked that, like, hey, what if we just gave every student an internship? And we were all like, yeah, let's just give every student an internship. And then we just kind of laughed about it. And then the next day we sent out an email being like, oh, well, then we're like, let's go do it. So we went out and said, like, we'll go out and like create these virtual internships. And the thing was, like, I remember we weren't bullish on the idea in itself. We knew that we wanted to solve the mission, but the virtual internships, virtual job simulation idea that we ended up with, we kind of saw it as fallen from everything else that we had done. When we sent out an email to our user base saying that we were going to do some virtual internships, virtual job simulations, the thing that kind of like makes me proud, like, I think the funny thing is that we had put all this effort into it, and Tom had written this email, very basic email, and he had pressed send, and he walked to the toilet. And I had set up the system where when a student signed up to something, we would get an SMS. And the second Tom pressed send to that email, we had basically like my phone started ringing nonstop. And we're sitting next to our investors at that point, and our investors are like, "Oh, what's going on there?" And I'm like, "I don't know what's happening, but everyone is signing up to this thing that we've just sent out." And in the few minutes that Tom took to go to the toilet, and it took a while, we had interestingly gotten like 180 applications to our internship virtual job simulation then. And I think the crazy thing was that, like, looking back, we was just part of our constant process of learning and trying to figure out what could be helpful as students. But that was it. That was us finding the thing that would have actually had both the fit for the market and what students wanted, the employees wanted. And yeah, it was something that really kind of like, that was the culmination of all of the hard work after we realized that we had screwed up thinking and being so stubborn that we had an idea that was going to be it. And I think for me, that was probably like the failure stuff that I'm most proud of in the whole startup journey, which is like, we had almost come in too stubbornly, but we had really realized we had failed on what we wanted and what we achieved to do, which is build product market fit, but then corrected and tried to really solve it. And probably at an extreme level to get to where we were. So yeah, I think getting to what our first product became was probably crushingly sad when we realized we had failed in our first run through of it all. But we're proud because I think we're able to pick ourselves up and almost work at an extreme level to solve that problem down the line.
So talk to me about the point where you realize you didn't have product market fit. To the time that you got all of these pings on your phone, what kept you motivated between those two times?
Motivation. Motivation is such a funny thing when it comes to like doing a startup. That early phase was like, I think it was pure stubbornness. We had left our jobs to start this company and we had really wanted to make a difference. I think we're all like, well, if we're going to leave our jobs and, we're well paid, we're lucky enough to do a lot of these cool things. One was a lawyer at a top tier law firm then. I was running like growth and acquisitions at a marketplace company. So like we had left like some pretty cool jobs, good positions, and we wanted to make a difference. And I think for us, motivation was actually at that stage, and motivation changed over time, but I'll never talk about it in stages. At that stage of like, oh, we don't have something, we need to figure it out. I think it was just pure stubbornness. I think for us, we wanted to make a difference. We didn't want to fail, and we wouldn't let ourselves fail. That was our motivation then. We didn't want to let ourselves fail because we thought that the problem was so big and so real and someone had to figure it out, that we may as well make it us. We may as well make it us and do it in such a way that it actually would work. So I think that first bit was pure stubbornness and just a desire to achieve our mission. I think Tom and I were a little zealot like that. We had that zealotry around really trying to make a difference. And then when we got there, it was interesting. The motivation afterwards, after you get to something that kind of works, because, once we had the core products, we were lucky enough to grow and get students from like amazing universities and start getting these amazing brands to come on board. We had KPMG on board, Q Mallesons, and then BCG came on, like government departments started coming on. It was really like quite good. But like at that point, the motivation to trudge through, like really like, this is our 6th year now doing Forage. And we know that it's going to take a decade or more of commitment to even get to where we think you can go. The motivation right now is really A, try to achieve our mission. Like every time we find things hard, it's like, well, we're doing something worthwhile. B, I think the bigger thing as we kind of grow is this idea that, we've worked really hard to bring on amazing people to join our team to make a difference. We have amazingly talented leaders, amazingly talented engineers, amazingly talented product people, salespeople, who could all probably be out there making a lot more money, but are choosing to work with us because we are making a difference. So it's how do we do them right? How do we do them right at a day-to-day level as working with them, but also at a year-to-year level, so they feel like that they're getting, they're growing and they're getting their worth of spending their time here with us as a company. And that, like I wake up and that always keeps us going. I think thirdly as well, right? Like when we hear of these amazing stories of our students landing jobs and our employees being able to find amazing students, like it really keeps us going. When we started, we wanted to do a company that did align with a mission, but like it has been such an advantage because for us, there's really no reason to quit. Like there's always, we are helping someone every day, someone out there. You can see it if you look up social media or LinkedIn, you'll see people posting about Forage every day. I think the crazy thing is like that keeps you going because that alignment of being able to have a good mission, a good business, and really something quite unique as a technical challenge on a product level or as a business level, if you're thinking about the economics of it all. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what keeps us going, being able to help people out in such a unique way that can become a big company. So yeah, motivation, that early motivation was pure stubbornness and really wanting to make a difference. And then as we've grown as a company and organization, it really is, I think, a sense of, being able to make that difference, a sense of duty to the people that have put their time and investment, and being custodians of our team members' effort, and the custodians of some of our investors' money, custodians of the effort that the students put into the hours on our platform to be able to turn that into something valuable. I think just keeps us going.
Super cool. In wrapping up the podcast, Pasha, what are the three things or the three takeaways that you want to leave with the audience today?
Yeah, I think there's a few takeaways. I think one, at a high level, I think going off the topic of motivation, I think it's okay to be motivated to make a difference I think people separate the idea that you can make a good business and it be both nourishing and helpful for people around the world. I think there are ways to pull that off most of the time. And I think more people should be willing to try to build businesses that align, with those three things, companies that can be big, companies that make a difference, and companies that are unique, that don't exist yet. I think that's a huge thing that, as the years go on, is almost like ridiculous how much keeps us going every day to kind of work hard for Forage and everything that we do. The second takeaway is, I think with generative AI, the opportunity is quite large, especially when you think about generative AI as a tool to get you past current limits. I think one of the interesting things about generative AI versus, let's say, the era of the internet is that because it can be so personalized, it really gives you the chance to become much faster, much more engaged, much smarter, much more understanding of things that are happening than before. And if you use that well, you can really, I think an individual can make much more impact in the world overall. And then I think the third thing is I think hopefully the last takeaway is that someone out there listening, whether, they're a bit younger or they're kind of in their career thinking about making a difference, it is possible to be able to pull it off and actually create cool things by putting the effort into it and having fun and being able to mix, this idea of mission and technology and work all together. So yeah, I think hopefully someone out there gets a little bit more energy to make a difference, in their community or in a way that makes sense to them, right? I think I keep really about generative AI, but helping small communities out, right? Running small organizations, helping families be better, helping companies become a bit more, streamlined. I think there's so many opportunities, and hopefully this gets you going a little bit more on that.
Super cool. Pasha, lovely to catch up with you, man. It's insane to see. I remember you as this tiny little intern that came into the office, and then 10 plus years go by, and then you turn into this guy. And I'm super proud of you and super proud of the work that you do, and it's mind blowing. So, congrats to you. Keep going. I want to see bigger and better things from you going forward. Just for people that want to reach out to you for any other questions and whatnot, how should they do that?
Yeah, I mean, visit theforage.com to visit the website. My email is pasha@theforage.com. Always happy to help companies and people out, who are trying to make a difference. Yeah, feel free to reach out anytime. There's never, I'm never too busy to try to help, someone trying to do some cool stuff in the world. That always excites me. But yeah, feel free to email us and reach out and connect us on LinkedIn and other things. Pasha Rayan is my name, and unique enough to hopefully be found pretty quickly.
Super cool. Thank you so much, man. Take care.
Thanks, Imtiaz.